Welcome to the Brains, Bubbly and Beyond podcast, powered by the LIT Institute. LIT stands for Law, Innovation, Technology, Tomorrow, and we provide you with innovative curriculum and courses that are bridging the gap between law and technology, transforming you from lawyer to legal innovator. Join our Gen AI Legal Accelerator program or our Legal Innovation Accelerator, coming up soon. Visit us at litinstitute.com. I'm your host, Narishka Bowen. So welcome to episode 1 of our podcast, and I'm so privileged today to have with me Mosa Thekiso. Mosa is the executive head of International Regulatory, Digital Services and Platform at AI at Vodacom. She has extensive experience in both M&A, ICT regulatory across the continent and in Europe, and we are really privileged to have us here with us today. Mosa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
And thank you for sharing a glass of bubbly with me.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers.
We have to sip.
So Mosa, let's start at the beginning. Tell us a bit about your career journey and how have you ended up where you are today in this successful position on the cover of magazines. We don't hear many lawyers on the cover of magazines. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. Tell us a bit about that journey. Would 18-year-old Mosa have believed what's happening today? Was this all part of the plan?
It actually wasn't part of the plan. Throughout my high school career, I actually wanted to go into the sciences. You know, I was convinced that I was going to go into engineering, materials engineering, and metallurgy, and it didn't work out. I didn't like it. I went to one of those school, take a girl child to school things at Mintech, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is not what I want to do. I don't want to be sitting with a lab coat on, looking through, a
Just
microscope.
That?
Exactly. Like, this is so not me. And then law kind of just happened.
Yeah.
And I really, really loved it. I enjoyed my time at Wits. I think there's just something magical about Wits, the law school. It's just a melting pot of all sorts of people. And I think I enjoyed the people side and I actually enjoyed studying law. I really, really loved it. And I think what's amazing about Wits is the courses they have available. So, at elective level, 3rd year, 4th year, we got to do telecoms law, as you know. We got to do competition law, tax law. And that's where I kind of got into telecoms and started thinking this is something I could really do maybe later on in my career.
Yeah.
But at that moment, I thought this is fantastic. So that was kind of the beginning. And then I stayed on after my LLB. I actually did a master's program in telecoms law and broadcasting. At that time, I think the Electronic Communications Act was still fairly new. And also what's interesting is one of the professors from the science school, I think the engineering school, came to teach us about the technology behind, the legislation we were studying. And looking back now, he told us about convergence and the convergence of technologies.
Yes.
And at the time, I think all our phones could do was, send texts and, voice calls. And
Please call me.
exactly. And I never imagined that our phones could do what they do today.
Yeah.
But he kind of started to tell us about the technology, and that piqued my interest. So after that was Norton Rose Fulbright for articles, and I think that's where we met. Yeah, and I was privileged to start working in the Africa legal team, and I always made it clear that my interest was more on the telecom side. So I think that the partners in the team really made an effort to involve me in, even if it was an M&A matter, it would be for the big telco clients or still Africa focused. So that's where also my interest for working on the continent began. And, I really look at that time as such an amazing time and, just exponential growth. And yeah, I think it's really is a privilege to get that kind of training. And so it's been it feels like a long career, but you look back, It's not that long. So after that, took a leap of faith, went to study in Germany, and
so what led to that decision? Like that,
Yeah.
Were you feeling unfulfilled, looking for some greener pastures? What was the motivation?
It's something I'd always wanted to do. I'd always wanted to live in a different country, outside of the continent. I'd done work on the continent. I'd, through Norton Rose, gotten to work in Tanzania. But I was looking for something different. Also, to learn more about the business side of things.
Yeah.
How to read financials, how to think more strategically and be more pragmatic when doing my work. And I think that's what the second master's program I did really solidified for me. Also met people from all over the world, South America, Eastern Europe, China. So it's also that personal growth.
Yes.
That was fantastic. Yeah.
And tell us about some of the hidden factors or hidden costs when moving to another country.
Oh my
sometimes you
gosh.
think, it costs X tuition fees to study, but what are some of the other things people would not think about?
Yeah. So outside of your tuition, and it's expensive because you're coming from a rand-based economy going into a euro-based, and you can't really anticipate the cost. You can do as much planning as possible, cover tuition and what you think your living costs or your monthly living costs are going to be. So things like rent, and those jurisdictions are strict about things like medical insurance. So you must pay upfront for the whole year or the duration of your stay. So things like that. But what really caught me off guard was like the cost that you get at the end of each semester. So you think, okay, I'm done. I've covered my tuition. I'm good. Suddenly you have to pay for your material, your literature, your case studies, and that's in euros. And you're like, oh my gosh, I hadn't planned for this. So you quickly just have to think on your toes or on your feet, and and make a plan. So it is challenging, and you're going from earning a salary and a decent, good salary, you add one of the top firms in the country to suddenly no income, you're on a student visa, and essentially you just have to make a plan to parents help you here and there, but you have to dig into your savings. You do what you have to do. But yeah, that's the downside. The unfortunate side is those hidden costs. Yeah.
And is it worth it at the end for the experience?
I would say it is. I think some of my classmates had maybe a bit of a full experience because they could afford to travel across Europe and all of that. I mean, I couldn't travel as extensively because it's expensive. But we did have class tours. We got to go to Belgium and Berlin and other parts of Europe, and it's very fulfilling. I think not only from what you're learning in class, but just the people experience. I think I grew up in Joburg. I spent most of my life in Joburg.
Yeah.
It was the second time I was living outside of that comfort zone.
Yes.
And language also. You don't speak German. And,
What about cultural differences?
And cultural differences, exactly. And you come from a country where, even Ubuntu, people are warm. And you get to a place where people are a little bit more reserved. They keep to themselves and they take a long time to warm up. Whereas here, most of the time people are ready to meet you with a smile and, just extend that warmth. So those differences they're a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I noticed also early on when I worked in the UK. A lot of things I feel we take for granted in our society, like walking into a lift and saying good morning or hello, and just like greeting. You don't have to know a person to greet a person, and
100%.
Then I realized it's actually not a global
culture
for humans to just like say hi.
Exactly.
Which is something we take completely for granted, and so it's the little things I feel you start appreciating about what you have, but you only notice them when you don't have them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like you said, it's things we take for granted. And it's how we grew up. We were taught that if you walk into a room and there's people in the room, older people in the room, you greet them. It's a sign of acknowledging their presence, and it's a sign of respect. So, other places just do it differently.
Yeah.
And I think those are the small culture shocks you come across.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, you mentioned previously, it's like there were some pivotal points in your career that, you also faced with a bit of fear and hesitation before making those pivots. So maybe talk us through some of those pivotal changes. What was the fear you faced? And how did you finally make those decisions to make those changes as opposed to just staying in your comfort zone?
Yeah. So you have to have those honest conversations with yourself. And I think for me, the first one was, being in Germany and expecting a certain trajectory for your career. And then quickly realizing, I was fortunate that straight after my program, I was able to find a job. And it was a job that kind of has added or made my career a bit richer in terms of where I am now. So I got to work with a consultancy that looked at privacy laws. And that's where I learned a lot about the GDPR. I think the GDPR was just still new. It hadn't come into full force yet, but we were preparing companies for that kind of work. Some of the clients were really big European and actually multinationals. Yeah. So even though I had a decent job, but, I just had that honest conversation with myself to say, this isn't what... I don't see a lot of growth in terms of where I am right now. And it's not what I actually wanted to do, in the sense that I think I've always wanted to work on the continent. I've always said to any friend of mine who was willing to listen that, I would love to help Africans connect and have access to knowledge and information. And being based in Europe, doing work on European soil and not really getting to do African work, it impacted me. And, things like your lifestyle, it does get a bit lonely, because now you don't have that class you don't have that camaraderie. So that was the first kind of pivot where I was like, you know what, let me go home.
Yeah.
And sometimes you may feel like it's a failing, but for me it wasn't. It was scary, but I was like, let me go. And then after that, I went back into a law firm because that was comfortable. But then I was privileged enough to move into a telco. And even in the telco, that was a big shift, because you're going from, having practiced in the M&A world, done a little bit of privacy, but now you full on technology, digital platforms, digital services, and mobile financial services and those platforms. And now the contracts you're negotiating are completely foreign, and it's almost like starting from scratch. So that was the first, I think, really, really major pivot for me. Yeah.
And in terms of your personal development, what is the growth like experiencing something like that and moving with something like that?
It's something that I think I'm still learning. It's that fear. And I think we all have a little bit of imposter syndrome. And it's really magnified when you have to change, or rather move from what you know and what you've become decent at doing.
The expert.
Exactly, And now it's like you are in a completely foreign world. And that imposter syndrome really does seep in. And you kind of have to really trust yourself and think, you know what, I may not be an expert in this field yet, but I'm willing to put the work in and I'm willing to learn. And I think that's what it is. It's not being afraid to make mistakes and asking for help and putting in the extra effort. I would then sit with the technology guys, and now we're looking at, a scope of work, and that's a technical document, rather. It's an annexure. You really just have to immerse yourself and try to understand what are we actually trying to achieve, so you can work on the legal wording for that. Yeah. So it's,
I think what you've explained quite nicely is having a beginner's mindset, not feeling, oh, I'm too good to learn. Start again, because it's only going to pay off in the long run. You're getting new skill sets. But if you feel, oh, I'm too senior to start again, you may be actually missing huge opportunities for your personal development, career growth. So I think that beginner's mindset is even more important now. In this digital revolution we're living in, AI, all of that, our jobs are changing, rapidly. And if we are not going to come with a beginner's mindset, I've been doing this for so many years, the way I've been doing it, I think, there's maybe you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, exactly. You spot on. And I think that is my current role, another big leap of faith where, I wasn't a regulatory lawyer. And suddenly we're dealing with new and emerging technologies, cloud technology. I didn't even know what cloud technology was when I started my role, AI regulation. Yeah. These are all new technologies. And as you know, the law is being developed as we go. And we're playing catch up to the technology. But you can't regulate for something you don't understand. Yeah. So it requires just a little bit of humility. So you go in it with that, the beginner's mindset of, I'm going to approach this with this hunger to learn, and I'm just bringing my ability to analyze and to think through things and to read, essentially, and just be willing to learn. Yeah. So it's a fantastic space. I'm very excited about it, but as with anything that's new, it is also quite scary. Yeah.
I mean, tell us a bit more about some of the work you've done on the continent, the different regions. I mean, we know Africa is not Africa. It's a diverse region with, different cultures, every border you cross, different politics, different socioeconomic climates, all of that. But given that you do have exposure to a number of the different regions and jurisdictions, what are some of the unique challenges facing the region? What is the regulatory approach? Now we know in the EU we have the AI Act. When we got the GDPR, we saw a flurry of data protection regulation being passed across the continent. In this last couple of years, if you look back 5 years to today, who has a data privacy law or a regulation? It's huge difference. Are we going to see something like that with AI, or do we have more basic things that we should be focusing on the continent? What's happening?
Oh, there's a lot going on, and I think my approach to the different legal systems on the continent comes from the basics I learned in my Africa legal role, when I was still starting out. And I think that's where I learned that each country does have its own context. And I think that's just not important. It's not only important for the legal approach, but it's also important to the approach for technology. So what we're finding, for example, when you bring AI in, right, it's the algorithms and some of the models are created in Europe. So they don't have the African context. And those are things we have to actually take into account and think about, how do we develop our own? And do we have the skills?
And it exacerbates the problems of bias and discrimination, because 100%. The algorithm is only as good as the training data.
Exactly.
If we as a region were excluded from the training data, how then can we fairly and responsibly and ethically apply the outputs? Because they would be continuously biased because the data is just not there.
Exactly. But then the question is, are we willing to give training data? And that is the foundation. And how do we treat the data? So, and I think that the approach and this is something I learned when we first started dealing with cloud technologies and looking at how we can deploy these technologies in the various legal systems. And, the approach that the cloud service providers take is they look at Africa on a regional basis. So putting up these technologies or deploying them to Africa is not cheap. And it requires a lot of infrastructure, it requires skills, it requires a lot of money. So they look at Africa from a regional perspective, and then they'll put the technology strategically. Obviously, they'll have one in South Africa because that's a big market, Nairobi is a big hub, Nigeria, there's certain locations that make commercial sense for them. And I think what's difficult is then going to the countries where, the cloud service providers haven't identified, and you're trying to deploy these services and use their data and have their data leave the country, the respective country, and then trying to explain to the regulator why these CSPs aren't willing to put technology in their country because they're like, well, we also just as deserving, for lack of better wording. Why can't we have the technology sit here?
Yeah.
And it's that debate of, well, do you have enough business to give them? And because at the end of the day, they're a company and they have to create revenue or generate revenue. So we're finding that the laws are at different levels of sophistication. So some are quite advanced, some are moving at a rapid pace. So what we're seeing in Tanzania is a lot of policy, a lot of law, a lot of just a lot of activity in the tech space, whereas some countries are a bit more quiet, and others, just basically adopt from SA or, use best practice. So it's a mix.
Yeah.
Which makes it hard for a business to deploy shared services because find that the technology is common, but the laws aren't.
Yeah.
The regulatory infrastructure or the regulatory environment is not consistent. And I think that's one of the issues we have is consistent application or consistent use of laws across the continent. So those are some of the issues we're facing. I know you and I spoke about how now a lot of countries will be looking at AI policies, AI, laws, legislation. And, we spoke about how maybe the basics, figure out how you deal with data, with personal data, have those laws in place. And I mentioned Ethiopia. And interestingly enough, Ethiopia, I think in the past couple of days, has now passed a bill for data protection because they had started looking at AI before they had data protection laws. So it's those kind of things that we're dealing with. Yeah.
And what about digital inclusion? I mean, yes, we're accelerating into the generative AI and automation world, but if people don't have access to the internet, then what? Where are we? And I mean, tie that in with financial inclusion. We still have a large population of unbanked. Are there policy moves to address these? Is it a critical on the agenda, or are people being left behind?
Yeah, I think that's something that's very close to my heart because I think that's the whole point. If we can't have people access information, then what's the point? Or access knowledge? And digitization, there's a lot of policy frameworks. I think the intention is there from a policy perspective. But for me, what's interesting is then what happens between the policy creation to the actual legislation. There's a gap there. And I think that's where you find political will and other factors. For example, rolling out network infrastructure is expensive.
Yeah.
And, MNOs and ISPs are looking at doing that. And I think they're pushing very hard to do that. But, there has to be, those enabling frameworks have to be there. We're seeing Elon Musk with his satellite solution. And, we'll probably see a lot more of that. But where does that leave the MNOs who've made a lot of investments into the network infrastructure, So you have to balance things out. And on the other side, devices, in order to be digitally enabled, you have to have a device.
Yeah.
And getting smartphones are expensive. So it's also that smartphone penetration. Are we making the right phones for the right people, for a granny sitting in rural Eastern Cape? It's difficult to get her to be part of the digital economy and the digital conversation and get her access to knowledge if she doesn't even have the right device. So those are the kind of things we're looking at. I think in South Africa, the financial inclusion question is kind of getting resolved in the sense that there's more mainstream banking available. However, mobile money is really important in Eastern Africa, for example, and that requires network and MNOs and, but I think that is kind of how we're bridging the gap, but I think we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we get there because
I
want us to take advantage of the digital revolution, be part of it rather than being left behind and try to leapfrog and catch up as we sometimes do when it comes to technology. So let's hope for the best.
Yeah.
Now, I know another more controversial piece when it comes to AI and generative AI specifically has been in the art world. And I know this is also another passion of yours. And so let's chat a little bit about artistic integrity for a second. Now, a lot of these tools, have been touted as being able to create art as good as the best artists that ever lived. They've been trained on, the Picassos and the Salvador Dali's and whatever else has been out there, and they can replicate quite well some of the methodologies and the styles and however you want to describe it. Now, where does that leave artists, both traditional and digital artists? What is left for human creativity? What is this now that we're entering where we have this AI art versus this human art? I mean, given that it's a passion of yours, what's your view?
Yeah, I enjoy art, but I think I enjoy the entire story.
Okay.
So I enjoy the creative process of, you look at the work and the work is the final product. And how often have you had it where you look at a piece of art, a painting or, a sculpture, and you have your own interpretation and you go to a walkabout and the artist comes in and tells you a completely different story, And I think for me, that's the essence of it. That is this person's creative journey and it's their storytelling. And, one of my favorite South African artists, if not my favorite, is Blessing Ngobeni. And he's had such a rich life. He was wrongly convicted of a crime he didn't commit, and early in his life, I think early 20s or late teens, went to jail, eventually came out of jail, and then started creating his art. And his art is actually political commentary. And I think through his art, you get to go through his journey with him, and kind of have a good understanding of his background and where he comes from and what he values now, even from a political perspective, The same with another artist I really enjoy, Lady Scully. I mean, I went to a walkabout where she told us the works that she was actually showing us was the story about how the colored people in the Cape who were working on wine farms used to get paid in liquor. And what that actually, the impact it had on society, and their lives. And that's something that an AI-generated work cannot give you, It can't give you that context. It can't give you that story. It can't give you that consciousness. And that, I think, is a fundamental difference.
No, I think that's so important. And there's this whole debate around AGI. Will it have consciousness? And will it... be on the same level as us or surpass us? Can it think? Can it feel? Does it have emotion? And I think, a lot of what you're saying describes the difference between us humans and what makes us still special versus the AI generated, world that we're now living in. And, my view is we're going to be saturated with generative AI content in all forms, whether it be written. I mean, we're already saturated with written, with blogs and social media posts, and then obviously photos and images. And very soon it will be videos, already artwork. And I'm sure every content creation you can think of, we will get AI generated versions of that. And my view is that, that 1% or however many percent that will still be human generated from the soul with emotion, with feeling, is going to have a premium.
Yeah.
Because it's coming from that consciousness, that life force within us. That we can't replicate in a computer.
Yeah.
We can replicate our mind and our brain to an extent. We can replicate our body to an extent in the form of a robot. But there's a third thing.
Yeah.
and we describe it differently, depending on our philosophy and our spirituality and our background, that third thing. But there is a third thing. I think we can all agree.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, the life-giving energy that I don't think can be replicated.
Exactly.
So yes, they will be smarter than us, like mind intelligence, calculate better than us, logic better than us, replicate better than us, whatever it might be, faster than us. But there is this other thing. And as we enter this next phase of humanity, if we as humans focus on the third thing, that's what's going to keep us ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And I think that's what's going to ground us, because we can really get carried away as human beings. We've seen it through various revolutions, whether it was the Industrial Revolution, whether it was the creation of the wheel, whatever it is. And I think what's going to be difficult is distinguishing between those systems or features that can be done by AI. And that is an inevitability. There are certain things that we as human beings do that are just going to be done better and quicker by AI. But I think the essence of being human, and the values that come with it, and how we treat each other as human beings, and things like raising children, and instilling certain values in them and guiding them through life and treating each other in a decent manner, and that's what you speak to. It's that third force that is a binder to all of us, and is a catalyst to how we go about our lives. That remains. But I think it's going to get more and more difficult to distinguish between what should be done by AI and what is, what should be reserved for proper humans.
It's going to be an interesting time ahead of us. And I think just to continue on that message, perhaps also, I know you love the theater as well.
Yeah.
So what is it about going to the theater versus watching a screen in your home? I mean, there must be something there as well. I mean, what is it for you?
100%.
What do you get from going to the theater versus watching a screen?
It's that human connection, right, that we speak of. It's the fact that you can basically be in a room where actors are on the stage and living a story, but in real time. And I don't know, there's just something different about the expressions.
An energy.
And 100%.
Are you not receiving and giving?
Exchange.
It's an energy exchange, right? That you don't get from a screen.
Yeah. And those little quirks that we have as human beings where the actor will look at you straight in the eye. You can't get that on TV, on the screen, and it's just the best. I mean, last week we went to see The Cry of Winnie Mandela, and obviously we had it was a predominantly female cast.
Okay.
I think four women and a gentleman, and it was those things that I saw parts of me in some of those ladies, and in how they express and how they speak, and and having that interaction was just so invigorating. And not only just the story, but the way in which it is done. And I think you're absolutely spot on. It's that energy exchange. It really, really is invigorating. And I don't know if a robot could give you that, right?
Yeah. I think COVID even amplified that for us, because obviously we went digital everything. And then 2 years later, people craved a little bit of human interaction. I mean, we wanted our hybrid. We wanted our work from home days. We didn't want to give it up entirely, but we wanted a bit of both. Yeah. Like conferences came back. We didn't just only have webinars anymore. People wanted to be in a room with other people, for example. So I think there is something about this human energy that we must not forget as we go into this automated digital AI revolution, and those of us in the space, I think we also need to speak out about it, because we don't want to just be consumed by this.
I mean, you showed us that OpenAI, their new robot, and that was scary.
The figure
was
one.
Scary, because that cognitive function that it has is scary. But you're right, we need to maintain, our human
humanness. And I think another topic that we chatted about before was about fashion. And I'll just say, for me, Mosa has been one of the people that from the time I've known her, she is impeccably dressed, always well put together, always stylish. I mean, there's many people I know who have their good days where they've got a good outfit on, but she is consistently well put together. So I wanted her to share a little bit about her fashion philosophy, if I can call it that, or a style philosophy, because I think it's so important, especially in this consumption, fast fashion world we in. I think, I wanna be like Mosa. I hope she becomes a fashion vlogger one day so I can get influenced by her.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy clothing like any other woman, from a young age I've enjoyed it. I have parents who love style, and I think that's something that they instilled in my sister and I, that, go for quality, go for longevity, go be conscious about what you spend your money on. My mom was always a big believer in make sure your shoes are good leather shoes, good leather belt, and you're good to go. And I think now that I'm older and really apply my mind to what I wear, I'm a big believer in conscious fashion. I think we are stuck in this hamster wheel of overconsumption. Fast fashion really has gripped all of us, and I think we just I don't know if we don't care enough about understanding the entire production chain of whatever you're wearing, and also where the clothes that item you've worn once that you think you've done well to give away to someone else, what happens to that item eventually? I think, I watched a documentary, I think it was the CNN documentary a few years ago, that kind of shows you how, countries like Ghana have become just a huge dumping ground.
Oh my gosh.
For all of the clothes, the waste.
The world's waste.
Exactly. That comes out of predominantly the US, Europe, other parts of the world, and where it ends up on the coastline, in the actual ocean.
Oh my gosh.
And I think it's a bit of a shame that we're not, you can make a difference as an individual, in the sense that, this one way lifestyle we're using is just really unfortunate. So I really believe in buying local as much as I can. And where I can't, local isn't always available, it's a little bit expensive, then apply your mind. Are you buying sustainable cotton, more natural materials, linens, staying away from the polyesters, etc.? So it's,
Do you think this fast fashion kind of trend that we're seeing with these Shein hauls and people buying, 50 items or whatever it is it part of this dopamine culture that we have with social media, where we're chasing likes, we're chasing, so, we need a new top every day. We need is it the same type of psychology behind it?
Yeah, I think it feeds into it, definitely, because why do you need a Shein haul of 3,000 Rand worth of dresses? What is it for? And a lot of the time it's to take pictures in. It's to be seen in a specific light. And I think there's definitely a social media element behind that. And I think just being conscious about it is so important. I know for me, leaving Instagram was a big part of that, because you are influenced. And it's interesting. I think influencer culture for me is very interesting. And I want to see what the evolution of that looks like, especially with AI. One of the prohibited AI systems under the EU Act is anything that influences you in a subliminal way, So I wonder if influencer culture is heading towards that. But I think we take for granted how you lose a little bit of your authenticity every time you are influenced in a certain direction. Like, do you ever just stop and take a moment and think about what you like intrinsically as Norushka, as Mosa? What do I like? What speaks to me?
So what's your advice for people perhaps stuck in this trend following cycle, but want to learn about their style, who they are, they want to dress authentically? Where do you start?
It's a tough one. But I think it starts with your interests. It starts with, what really speaks to you. Are you into certain fabrics? Are you into certain colors? I think you create your own algorithm over time. But I think it also comes through exploring.
Yeah.
Are you out in nature? Are you going to art galleries? And granted, we have different interests, but I think the more you understand your interests and you understand who you are, the easier it is to then develop your own taste. And I think we can't take away from the fact that we are influenced one way or another, but I think it's important to be discerning. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important message. We've lost touch with who we are.
Yeah.
And because we don't know who we are, we so easily are able to be influenced because there's a gap with that disconnection.
Yeah, and that's why you see, if you look at Instagram, everyone looks the same. Everyone's homes are decorated in the same way. Everyone gravitates towards the same events.
That can't be natural.
It can't be natural. It's like
not sounding natural.
Part of what makes us human is the diversity.
Yeah.
And if we lose that, then AI is really gonna come for us.
Maybe I guess social media was just a nice platform to set us up for AI, because now we all have been substantially brainwashed that we'll just be consumed.
We'll just be herded along,
Let's just follow follow our new AI leaders.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's both scary and exciting world that we're living in, I think. Now, Mosa, we've discussed a lot about your incredibly successful career journey, numerous creative interests, travel pursuits. But there's one element we haven't yet touched on, and that's family life, family planning. Where's the balance between the successful career woman and the family part, the partner part, the mom part? Where are we?
The ever elusive balance, right?
The balance, does it exist?
Does it exist? And I think, I think it's a tough one in the sense that for the majority of our lives, and I think by virtue of us growing up in the 90s, in the new democracy, and going to school when we did, and going to varsity and when we did, and starting our careers when we did, we kind of really focused in on that. Or maybe let me speak for myself.
Yeah.
I've really focused on that. And you set certain goals for yourself.
Yes.
First, it's to graduate. Then it's to do your articles, pass board exams. Then you an associate. Then there's the next thing and the next and the next. And then, for me, I always had that dream of I want to be, in a solid life partnership. I want to, have kids, have a family. But I don't think I had put enough intentionality behind it. And I don't think I was making as much effort. And actually, a few years ago, I was listening to a podcast by Brene Brown, and she said something along the lines of, I'm as ambitious about my personal life as I am about my professional life. And I think that really, rang a bell for me. Like, have I been ambitious enough about my personal life?
Where's the goals?
And that's where that third force we were talking about comes in also, because some of these things need divine timing and divine planning, but it also requires effort. It requires meeting people, putting yourself out there, and then also effort in taking control of your own fertility, for example, and for me, that meant thinking about preserving it as much as I could.
Wow.
And the egg freezing journey for me that I went on about 2 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The year before last was very important because that was taking as much control as possible to the extent that we can, because I think going or having hopes about having a family requires you realizing that part of it is a miracle, really, in my view. But in as much as you can set yourself up to succeed, I think medical technology and medical science has allowed us to do that. And that's something that I'm I think women should know is available to them. It is expensive, I won't lie. It is taxing on the body, it's hormones and all of that. But I think it's fantastic that it is an option for us. Yeah.
So what were some of the events or triggers that led up to your decision? Was it just timing, biological clock, or was, did something shake you one day to wake up and say, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, it was a combination of things. I'm a big believer in therapy, and not therapy just because you're in crisis, but therapy as a form of maintenance.
Yeah.
So it's one of the conversations I was having with my therapist, and he suggested it. And then also on the medical side, my gynae was like, okay, let's now have a plan.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? So I think having access to good advice is also a privilege. And I know that a lot of women aren't in that position. But I think if you do have that access, it's something that, you can really explore for yourself if you have similar goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there are many women out there right now probably having this internal debate with themselves. Yeah. They've ticked all the boxes, met all the goals in their career journey, and then assumed the other part would have just fall into place, and it would have been time now, and now they're ready. But as you said, maybe the intentionality or the divine timing, whatever the reasons were, it hasn't happened. What advice do you have for them? Because I think you're one of the few people who are speaking out on a public platform about a very important issue, and I think there are people who may really need your advice right now.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm in a position to advise anyone, but I think...
Advise on your journey.
Yeah, I think own it, right? I think own it. And I think I touched on this before. Have an honest conversation with yourself. And I'm a doer. I like just getting it done and doing it, we can have multiple conversations about what's available. But if you can see that, okay... I'm running out of time. I don't like using that phrasing, but I think it's the reality of it. I'm running out of time. So what options are available to me? And basically just, owning your story and seeing what's available. And like I said, I know it's expensive, so it makes it very, very tough. And I did look at what's available from an medical insurance perspective. And unfortunately, the leading providers of medical aid will only assist from a financial perspective if you are if you are with a partner and you've been trying for a certain amount of time.
So you have to kind of show like a medical reason why.
Exactly.
Yes, I see.
Exactly, yeah.
Are there any things you would want people who are about to embark on the journey to know that you didn't know and you wished you knew before?
I think it's taxing on the body.
Okay.
I think that's a big one, the hormones.
Yeah.
And also, you don't know how you can get a certain number of eggs out, but you don't know how many are going to be viable.
No guarantees.
Because then there's no guarantee. So you might actually have to do it a few times. Luckily for me, once was enough.
Yeah.
But you might have to do it a few times, which I think can also be taxing emotionally, physically, and financially.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you for sharing this particular story with us. I know it is a personal journey, but I think you are going to touch many lives that, people think they're alone. And now they know actually we're not alone. There are many of us that may be going through this. We're just not sharing the journey, and so we're actually not aware.
Yeah.
So I think I think this will assist somebody out there.
Yeah,
so
and I think some of my friends having gone through it actually was a bit of offered a bit of comfort.
Yeah. No, that's great. So before we let you go, Mosa, I have 3 short questions to end with. So tell us, what are you watching on Netflix?
Oh my gosh, I just finished watching the 3 body problem.
Same.
Yeah.
Do you understand it?
Oh my gosh, I'm such a sci-fi girl.
I know.
And also I thought maybe D&D would redeem themselves after messing up Game of Thrones. And I'm not sure yet, but I really enjoyed it.
Just like, waiting for season 2. I was like,
me too.
And
yeah.
Now what?
I don't know if I should just read the books or just wait for, for season 2. But yeah.
Tell us, what are you reading?
Oh my gosh. My reading is not where I want it to be at the moment. But I forget the title. I always forget the title. But I'm reading a book, or slowly making my way through a book on, the mineral issues in Africa. So you know how countries like DRC are rich in minerals, but the political factors that come with it, and also how they remain poverty stricken. So I'm slowly making my way through that book. I'm not good at nonfiction, and I think that's something I have to come to.
So
I'm such a fiction girl.
What's your usual type of fiction?
Sure. I'm really, right now I like African stories. So yeah, that's what I'm enjoying at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah.
And finally, what is the purpose of life?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, now with AI in the mix. Who knows? But I think
why are we here?
I think we are here to make a difference. Okay. And that looks different to each of us. And it might be just living a life of kindness where you embody that and you share that. Or it may be just, making small contributions in your own way. But I think we are here as part of a bigger plan and to contribute to the advancement of humanity, whatever that looks like for you. So, it may be for you and I making contributions to laws that connect Africans.
Yeah.
But I think we're here as part of a bigger body to make a contribution.
Are you living your purpose?
I think I am.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
I really think I am. And that doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. That doesn't mean you don't hurt people. But I think as long as you remain in your growth, you're doing something right.
So when I invite you back for season 10 of the podcast, how am I going to introduce you?
Season 10?
How will I introduce Mosa Thekiso?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one. Hopefully, as someone who's made a contribution in my field, meaningful contribution, whether it's through thought leadership, policy development. Ooh, that could be one. Policymaker, and a family woman. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being our first guest. I think this was really a special
I remember the book,
episode.
sorry. Oh. It's called The Looting Machine.
Looting Machine, okay.
Yeah. But thank you for having me.
No, it's really been a pleasure. And hope we'll have you back in a future season again when we have a lot more that we didn't even get to unpack in today's session. But thank you again.
Thank you. And time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Thank
Shall we
you.
do a little cheers?
Let's cheers. Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to the Brains, Bubbly and Beyond podcast. This is Narishka Bowen, and this is powered by the Lit Institute. Visit litinstitute.com. Thank you.